Hey guys, I'm Greg Atkinson. I'm based in the Charlotte, North Carolina metro region of the United States of America. And I'm a husband and a father and a writer and consultant and coach. I work with churches around the world. And as a consultant, I travel to churches across North America. And I also started a conference called the First Impressions Conference, and we're working on our fourth conference coming up in the fall. Excited about that. I'm going to be diving into a lot of what this conference is touching on, kind of this new normal, new season, new reality of, and what my talk today is going to talk about, where first impressions, how that fleshes out in this new reality. But I'm honored to have Steve ask me to speak here at this Church Online Summit. Known Steve online for a long time, have great respect for him, and we have several mutual friends, and this lineup is killer. This is a great summit, great conference, and I'm honored to be a part of this. If you want to know more about me, you can just go to gregatkinson.com, and that'll give you the down low on who I am. But if you wonder maybe why am I speaking, one, I was invited, but two, I've been pretty passionate about this for a long while. I started writing about church online in 2009, so 11 years ago. It's 2020 right now when I'm recording this. And I started writing about church online in 2009. I was watching several services that were broadcasting and streaming online, from Seacoast Church to Life Church and others. And I just started blogging about it. And then I went in 2009 and toured Life Church, met with my old friends, Tony Stewart and Brandon Donaldson, and I know Brandon's still there. And we walked around. You can actually find it if you search my name on YouTube. You can find an old video of me touring the Life Church studios, their online church studios, how they started lean and mean and just started from scratch. And just the forethought that went into seeing that this would be a new reality, and all the stuff that Terry Storch and Bobby Grunwald and those guys were doing was so far ahead of its time. And so I just wanted to document it and write about it. I loved it. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about first impressions in general, and how I view online church and broadcasts like this through the eyes of somebody who is a guest services, hospitality, first impressions consultant. That's what I do. My last two books are both about hospitality: Secrets of a Secret Shopper and the Hospitality Ministry Handbook. Are books that I wrote, and in those books I talk about online presence, I talk about social media, I talk about your website. And if I could go back in time, I would talk about your online campus, because that's what we're going to be talking about in this this talk here. So when you think of the word welcome, what comes to mind? You know, I've talked about at numerous conferences and in my writing that the Bible gives us a biblical mandate from Old Testament to New Testament to welcome the stranger, welcome the newcomer. What does that mean to love your neighbor, to welcome the newcomer, to welcome the stranger in the world, in this digital world, this COVID coronavirus, this world of online streaming and online church and online campus? What does that mean? These are some things that I'm going to throw out just for you and your team to think on and chew on. I hope that you will buy the all access pass to this so that you can watch this later with your staff and team and discuss it and think about it. But what does it mean to welcome the stranger in a digital context? What does it mean to love the neighbor? What's cool is, you know, throughout my whole career as a consultant and as a secret shopper, which is what I'm known for, a church secret shopper, is I have talked to people about welcoming them to our congregation, welcoming guests to our church. So when I've always said, company is coming, are we prepared? And so when company comes, are we ready? Do we have everything in order? Do we have our game face on, a smile and eye contact? And are we ready to greet people? Every Sunday is somebody's first Sunday. Where on a digital context, we're not welcoming them into our church and our congregation and our building. We are actually going into their home. And that's a very special thing. That's a very sacred thing. We are going into their home, and they have allowed us and invited us into their home when they turn on the online campus. They may be watching on a phone, they may be watching on a tablet or iPad, they may be watching on their laptop, they may be watching on TV like I do when I have the YouTube app up on my Roku and I watch YouTube on television. But it's a very cool thing that we are now going into their home. And so this is your opportunity to get beyond the four walls of the church, to get outside the four walls and to go and to reach Jerusalem and Samaria and the uttermost parts of the world. You can reach people that don't live in your community. You can reach people in another state, in another country. It's an amazing time that we live in, but we are going into their home. So when I think of the word home, what does it mean to feel at home? That's what we want our guests to feel. When they tune in to our broadcast, when they tune into our campus online, how do we make them feel at home in their own home? There's some things I want to talk about and mention just to give you things to reflect on and talk about as a team. One, we want to be as relational as possible. Ministry, discipleship, missions, outreach, it all comes down to relationships. We want to always be relational. Second, we want to be authentic and genuine. It's a big deal for somebody to give you their attention and to focus 30 to 60 minutes online on an online service or an online message. And so you want to be real. You want to be authentic. You want to be genuine. So what does it mean for someone online to feel loved and known and welcome? There's some ways that we can do that. This is all about maximizing engagement. For years now, people like Andy Stanley and my friend Carrie Newhoff have been talking about don't just track attendance, track engagement. Well, this is what we're talking about here. How do we engage with somebody in their house and make them feel welcome and known and seen? I think about, for me, as a kid growing up and now as an adult, I'm a movie guy. I love movies. I love films. I also love television shows. I love the video medium. I love film. And as a kid, where I grew up, I'm 44 years old here in the United States. If you're around my age, we grew up with Mr. Rogers talking to the camera, saying, "Hey, neighbor. Hey, friend, welcome. I'm so glad you're here." We grew up with Sesame Street. "Hey, neighbor. Hey, friend, welcome. We're so glad you're here," talking to us, looking to us, inviting themselves into our home, and that experience of breaking the fourth wall. It's a film term and something that I have loved my entire life. I remember being a teenager and loving the movie License to Drive with Corey Haim and Corey Feldman, and they would turn and Corey would look at the camera and he would talk to the audience. He would break the fourth wall. I've always loved that. Even as a teenager watching Saved by the Bell, Zach Morris would break the fourth wall and he would talk to the audience. Growing up watching movies like Ferris Bueller, when Ferris Bueller would talk to the audience. And then now very famous shows as an adult like The Office, where they break the fourth wall and they look right at the camera, or House of Cards, where Kevin Spacey talks right to the camera. It's a fascinating thing. And so what it does is it makes you feel included. It makes you feel welcome. It makes you feel in on it. And so pastors, if you're teaching, online hosts, if you're hosting, anybody who worship leader, when you're leading worship, to be able to acknowledge those watching online and to look right into the camera and to say, "Welcome, we're so glad you're here. We're so glad you tuned in," to break that fourth wall. It's something I've loved my entire life. And I just recently watched a movie about Mr. Rogers with Tom Hanks, and I was reminded about how much he just looks straight into the camera. You know, I watch Life Church a lot with Craig Rochelle, the largest church here in America, and he just looks right down the barrel of the camera. He's focused in on that camera, watching it, and he makes you feel included. You know, if I've been saying, if you're in this large auditorium and you're speaking and trying to look and use the room and work the room and look like there's this big congregation out there, it doesn't connect to me at home. I want you to look right at me. I want you to make eye contact and to welcome me and to make me feel seen and known and loved. It's personal, it's relational. There's that word again, it's real. I remember the movie Avatar, world blockbuster film, made tons and tons and tons of money. In Avatar, they said, I see you. I see you. When you're broadcasting online, you may have hundreds, you may have thousands, you may have tens of thousands of people tuning in and watching you online. Do they know that you see them? Not physically, you're not spying and peeking in on their living room, but do they know that you care and that you're trying to make a connection and connect with them? Leonard Sweet spoke at the 2019 First Impressions Conference last year, and I've been friends with Leonard for a long time, and in his writing, he used to talk about this term EPIC, E-P-I-C, EPIC, experiential, participatory, image-driven, and connected. And he's been talking about this in a post-modern society for years and years and years, and we are in a postmodern, some would even say post-Christian society. So how do we become participatory? How do we make people feel connected? It's very important when we're doing online church. I think of chatting and interacting with chat hosts and with the moderators and with the online hosts or MCs that are talking to the camera. I'm here in Charlotte, and so Elevation Church has a very big footprint. And I try to attend Elevation sometimes when I can on Saturday night and go to my church on Sunday morning. But I also watch them online every week. And Stephen Furtick does a great job. And during this COVID coronavirus season, he's done a really good job of connecting with the audience. And they have a global audience from many, many, many countries. And they have put like a big giant screen in the back, almost like a prompt screen or a confidence monitor that singers would use or pastors sometimes use for message notes. And he can see the chat scrolling through. And so if he says, where are you guys tuning in from? He can see Tokyo, Australia, New York, Denver, Kansas, New Zealand. Now he can look and see and interact and talk with them because he's got the chat scrolling in the back where he can watch. And it makes me feel connected. And he'll say, if you believe that, type that into the chat. And so if he says faith, he'll say, type faith into the chat. And it's very participatory, very engaging, very interactive is another word in that EPIC thing, to help people feel connected and to feel like they're a part of something and they're participating. They're not just at-home spectators. And so I consulted the last week before most churches here in the United States shut down and weren't meeting anymore physically. I was consulting with a large church in Baltimore, and it was pretty cool. It was a Catholic church. It was modern worship. They did Hillsong worship. I know there's people from Hillsong here. This was a Catholic church doing Hillsong, and it's just a really cool experience, Church of the Nativity in Baltimore. And they have an online campus, and so they in between services they had two hosts that were on the side of the stage, and they were talking to the camera, and they were emceeing, and they were speaking in between services. And when this coronavirus thing happened, they just went right into digital church with no problem. They were ready, they were prepared, they had already been doing it. For some of you that started right when this pandemic hit, you've got some growing to do, and there's a lot of resources out there and a lot of training from Open Church and Life Church and and those that have been doing this for a long time. And this summit I would watch, and like I said, I would go through this whole summit with my team. But in a chat environment, when you have a chat going on, this is a great time to use your volunteers. People, when they think of me and they think of First Impressions and guest services, I'm usually coaching and training greeters and ushers and parking lot team. Well, what do you do with those people when you're not meeting physically? Well, let's turn them into online hosts and chatting and moderators and just people participating in the services when they're happening. You could have a schedule, you could have a rotation. I was watching Alan George the other day at Life Church. He said they had 90 services, 90 online services. So that's a lot of scheduling for volunteers to get them plugged in, to make sure that you have hosts that are in there and that are moderating and are commenting and encouraging people. What do you do when somebody needs prayer? What do you do when somebody makes a decision to follow Christ? And so your greeters can greet online too. That's a very cool thing. Also, you want to encourage people to have follow-up, to be able to connect with your guests. And so most churches are using some form of digital connection card. It may be hosted on their homepage or their website. It may be a link that they put in the chat where you click on this button to follow up. It may be a text, like companies like Text and Church that say, text I'm new to 5513 or whatever your number may be. There are a lot of ways to do a digital connection card, but you do want to acknowledge guests, call attention to guests, welcome guests, thank guests, and try to connect with them so that you can follow up with them and let them know that you're grateful that they participated and that you hope that they will join you again, and see if they have any questions, and just ask them, is there any way I can pray for you? That's a great way that your volunteers can serve now. Just going through the church database, calling people, calling regular members and just saying, hey, sorry we haven't gotten to see each other in 2 months. Is there anything I can pray with you about? That's a great thing. Lastly, when I think about authenticity, I want to talk about the environment. And right now, the thing that I see happening well and not so well, depending on who I watch, is I kind of alluded to this earlier. I don't like to see a pastor in a giant room on a giant stage in a giant empty auditorium. That does not feel real and genuine and authentic to me. It does not feel worshipful to me. What I like is when I saw Jensen Franklin in his living room. I saw Brian Houston from Hillsong in his living room with some staff members. I saw J.D. Greer, president of the Southern Baptist Convention, in a hallway and with a bistro table in a little intimate setup. I've been watching a lot of services online. I like the more intimate gatherings. I saw Victory Church in Atlanta, Georgia, on a couch. They had a team sitting around 3 couches, and they were just sitting around conversing and chatting and talking and engaging. And it wasn't standing behind a podium. These are different days. These are different times. And so it's going to take different tactics to tell the same old story. Same story, same gospel, same truth, but a different way of telling it. And so I love seeing what these churches are doing so creatively. Right now in 2020 and going forward, we have a mission, a mandate to be as creative as possible, to use every ounce of our God-given gifts and talents and creativity to reach this generation and a generation to come. Pastors, what this means is going forward, when you come back, when we finally get to meet together again physically, it'll happen eventually. It could be 2020, it could be 2021, it could be 2022 before there's a vaccine in some states and countries feel comfortable. I don't know. I'm not in government and I'm not a scientist. What I do know is one day, Lord willing, we will gather together again. And what does that mean? Well, my friend Jeff Reed talks about phygital, both physical and digital. We are in a both-and world from now on. There's no going back. You can't shelve your online campus. You can't shelf this online church. You have to continue to include that audience. Some people, it may be months before they feel comfortable walking back through the doors. They may be a core member of your church. They may be a leader. They may be a volunteer. They may be elderly and vulnerable and have weak immune systems, but they're watching, Pastor. They're watching. So you have got to include them. So when you gather together for that first time and and get into the new normal, this new season of ministry. When you gather back together, you want to be sure to acknowledge them and say, hey, it's so great to see all of you guys here today. So great to have you worshiping with us here at Grace Church. And for those of you watching us online at home, we are so glad you tuned in as well. Never, ever, ever again forget the online audience, Pastor. They are watching from here on out. This was a defining moment, a milestone in the history of the Big C Church. And from now on, somebody is always watching through a screen, even if it's later in an archive video that gets stored on the website. They are watching media on the media tab on the website. Somehow, some way, people are watching online or listening to a podcast. And so we want to include them. We want to make sure that they feel welcome. It's a both and world from now on, and it's a beautiful time. I love it. I'm excited. I'm excited to be a part of this summit. Thank you for having me. And I wish you well as we blaze this new frontier. God bless you.